What's up, guys? So imagine a situation where you want to query any Ton wallet and you want to get the wallet's balance, the past transaction, and also NFTs if the wallet has it, without running a node or writing complex code. That is the power of Ton API. And today I'm going to show you how I built a Flutter application for developers to showcase why the Ton API is a game changer for blockchain interaction. Let me show you the power of the Ton API. So traditionally, before we commence the coding aspect, traditionally when you want to fetch blockchain data, you require to sync nodes, to pass raw data, and relying on clunky explorers, which is just so difficult and cumbersome for beginners. And that's where Ton API comes in. Now Ton API simplifies this process, giving you lightning fast queries. It gives you simple HTTP endpoints that you can just query and get your information about wallets, Jettons, and even NFTs. And there is zero gas fees required for all these read operations. And that is the beauty now of Ton API. So after putting this out, we are going to talk about what is required to build this particular application. Okay, so now after we've recognized the benefits now of the Ton API, we can proceed now with the coding aspect. So before we commence the coding though, we need to get some things out of the way, which is the requirements for building this program. So in order to build this program, one first requires an API key from the Ton API service, of which one needs to go to the website, which is tonconsole.com/dashboard. So you can clearly see now I have logged into my own Ton console. However, you might see that it may be a little bit different for you, considering maybe you've not logged in before. But then immediately, or as long as you have a Telegram account, and as long as you have a Telegram account, you're going to be able to create your to log into your Ton console and then get your API key. So as you can see, you get your API key. You can see mine on the screen, of which I'm going to blur out, but then you can see clearly there. So in your own case, if you're starting your project from beginning, you're going to have to create your API key. You can give it any name you want, and then give it for leave it as unlimited for testing, and then you can now create your API key. So immediately you are done creating your API key, then you go to the website tonapi.io, and then you can see now that they do have a lot of different API endpoints. However, we are going to choose the REST API because that's the one that we are going to be using for these projects. And when you see the REST API, you can see several endpoints that are available for you. So we're going to use just a select few of them for this our project, but then you can explore more endpoints and then get more. So now we go into our VS Code project, and we can see the nature of a Flutter project. When you go into your Flutter project, or when you first create it, you're going to have several directories, which the main directory is your lib directory, right? And your lib directory, which contains all your code or all the files that you are going to be writing, most of the files. I also used a .env file to save my API key and also the base URL of which I'm going to be querying in my application, which you can see is testnet.api.io, and it also stores my API key, of which is grayed out as usual. And I also need to go to my .gitignore file to ensure that when I upload it into my repository, this .env file is not uploaded to a repository. And this is good practice for any application you are trying to make, irrespective of what type it is. So after you've identified your main your lib directory and your main.dat, then we are going to import the packages that we would require for this project, of which particularly I used shared preferences, HTTP, get, which is for our state management, and icon launcher to ensure that the icon is used, and then intl, and these other packages that you can see on the screen here. So after that, then we proceed now with the coding aspect. I won't bore you much with the UI aspects of it, because it's not very interesting, because we just want to focus on the Ton API usage itself. But I adopt the model view controller architecture, where I have models which are responsible for taking information now from the API response, which is JSON, and then converting it into that object that I can easily use with my application. Then controllers which assess the data now from my API endpoints and then convert them into, or rather give me information that I can use now within my pages or the views of my application. So that's my model view controller architecture that I'm using. So so without wasting much time about the UI, we are going to focus now on the API themselves. Now the API, some of the API endpoints I used, the first one was to get the account information from a wallet address that has been provided. So if you can check the documentation from the Ton API documentation itself, you can see the endpoint that is given, which is v2/account/account ID, which that account ID part being the API, or rather the wallet address that you're going to paste in your application or from your application. So based on that, we now coded a simple function which accepts the address which is provided, and then it runs this function. When the response is gotten, it is being converted into a a wallet info object from the API, and then now this is now used by my application to display certain information. Then to display the wallet information, which include the balance and the wallet address that was used. So then the next thing is, we wonder, okay, how do we fetch the transactions now of a particular user? How do you fetch their transactions of their? So we use another endpoint which is shown here at the bottom under blockchain section. Under the blockchain section, you can see this endpoint, which is v2/blockchain/transactions/transaction ID, which is what is going to be used now to retrieve the transactions now of user, of which the transaction ID there is actually just the user's account ID. So when you use this API endpoint, you get the information that you require, and then also using the model, we can actually get a model for the wallet transactions. When we make the model, when we use the model there, then we convert it into that objects that we can now use and then display the transaction information in our application. And then following that is to display the NFTs, right? So NFTs, we go through another function which when we check the documentation, we see the documentation is accounts v2 / accounts / the account ID / the NFTs, of which we now provide the wallet address as required. So when we do this, it's going to fetch our NFTs items for a particular user if that user has it. So, and then we also, when the items are fetched, we convert them into NFT item, which are DAT models that I created, and then we now use this to actually display the NFTs in the UI. So in this my project, I skipped the aspects of UI creation because that's not the focus of this tutorial, but rather just to show you how the API works. So when I combine all these three things together is what gives me the project, which shows our balance, the account information, which is the wallet address, the transactions, and then also the the NFTs themselves. And then this is just touching on just 3 endpoints, of which are the API documentation. We can see so many endpoints, so that means the possibilities are endless. You can do so many different things with the Ton API, and you can build so many sophisticated application. But this application is just briefly showing the power of Ton API. That is it, guys. Thank you very much for being here with me as I show you this, and thank you to Ton API for making their API accessible, making it easier now for developers who are interested in going into Web3 to have a good starting point before they can go on to more complex topics. Thank you very much. See you next time. Peace.